thank the interpreters so much for sticking with us and listening to us so closely and being such beautiful voices to listen to. And I also want to thank all of the technician and crew that have made sure that we are heard and have the proper setup. So thank you also to all the crew and everyone. And of course, Alexandra and Mirto and Jochen and Gerosimo for the World Human Forum team. Thanks everybody for making this such an inviting and wonderful space to be in. So we're back, and we will engage in some conversation with you. But first, we will hear from Chiara Baldini. Baldini, permiso.
Hello, hello. Yes, so thank you everyone for being here. Thank you to the World Human Forum for inviting me. So I'm from Italy. I'm proud to be also the only Italian in the program so far. And I'm a raver and a DJ, even if today I might not look like one. But I'm also a scholar and a PhD candidate at CIIS. And for the last 13 years, I've been the curator of the cultural area of Boom Festival, which is an event that was briefly mentioned before. It's a reference, the mothership of all psychedelic festivals in the world. It happens in Portugal every 2 years, and now it gathers 45,000 people from 200 countries and territories. So my journey started in Boom Festival in 2004. I attended this event. It was like a massive pilgrimage kind of experience. The values of the festivals are around oneness and togetherness beyond national identities. Also, sustainability and respect of nature is a massive value of the festival. And so after my first night in this dense temple with many thousands of people, I re-emerged in the morning thinking, wow, this experience was the most healing, transformational, bonding kind of experience that I ever had. So I thought, I need to research, how did we get here? Is this something new, or is it a new way of doing something old? So this brought me to the mysteries of Eleusis. So my journey was the way around. Usually people get to know the mysteries of Eleusis and wonder what a modern version of that could be. I was already in some kind of modern version of it, and then I researched what could have been the possible, in this case, indirect lineage of these kinds of events. So I'm going to speak a bit now about the mysteries of Eleusis, and I'm going to bring it back in terms of possible collective experience of altered state of consciousness, whether psychedelically induced or not. Already the experience, the fasting, the walking was already inducive of a specific state of mind. And so we have heard in the panel the importance of set and setting. So what was the cultural set and setting of the mysteries of Eleusis? What were the values of that kind of experience? So let's go back to the mysteries as initiations, like the rituals as initiations into the mysteries of Demeter and Persephone. So who is Demeter? Demeter is the Earth Mother, or Mother Goddess, or the Grain Mother. And together with Persephone as the queen of the underworld, they are chthonic deities. So chthonic means of the earth. And their worship probably originated in agrarian societies that predated Greek culture as we know it. And these agrarian societies were typical of the Neolithic times when agriculture spread. So, connected to Demeter is also Gaia or Rhea, these pre-Olympian female deities. So, Neolithic cultures are also considered possible pre-patriarchal cultures. And I want to say this word that has not been mentioned until now, pre-patriarchal. So that's why these female deities that were embodying both the earth, but also the fruits of the earth, the food that give us life. So these pre-patriarchal societies, their culture revolved around what the academics called animistic cosmologies. So a way to look at reality and nature as possessing a soul. So these animistic cosmologies is also what we rediscover now when we open our ears to what indigenous cultures are telling us that is important, to see nature as possessing a soul. So I used indigenous cultures as a lens to look at the mysteries of Eleusis and to use some pointers, coming especially in this case from Braden Sweetgrass, which is a very important book that was written by a Native American scholar on nature and science, seen also from the lens of indigenous knowledge. So from this perspective, Eleusis can be seen as a ceremony for the land, celebrating and to also get an education of what is to live in right relationship with nature. So right relationship with nature, so the concept of right relationship is fundamental in indigenous cultures. And it's towards everything and everyone. It's between human beings, but it's also towards the next generations, it's towards the previous generations, and it's towards nature. So to be in right relation with nature, it means to be in a mutually beneficial relationship. And this sounds like a simple concept, but it is what makes a difference. Because we have a bit lost our way in having this mutually beneficial relationship. And often our decisions and our cultural paradigm pushes us towards being in a relationship that is beneficial for us, which is a short-sighted approach, as we can see now with climate change. So we've been talking about flourishing. There cannot be long-term human flourishing without natural and environmental flourishing. And so this is what they learned in Eleusis. You know, the statues of Demeter and Persephone at the entry were huge to give us perspective that actually we are one notch down in the importance of these mutually beneficial relationships. So also we've been talking about happiness, and I wanted to focus our attention on the kind of happiness that we can feel when we make nature happy. So when we preserve a river, or when we have campaigns to avoid whales to go into extinction. So that kind of happiness, I think it's something that our ancestors had an idea of. And also this is a kind of happiness that we have kind of lost our focus on. So yeah, these educational ceremonies were also education in the fact that it's plants that run the show. Without plants, we cannot survive. But they run the show as long as we allow them, because we are also so powerful that we can see now we can destroy the ecosystems that allow plants to thrive. So it was an education in having this humble posture towards nature. One notch down, not one notch up. That is one of the specificities of patriarchal culture. We are the ones who run the show. No, they or nature is the one that runs the show. So in seeing nature as alive, there is a shift in perspective that US eco-theologian Thomas Berry defines as the shift from seeing nature as a collection of objects to a community of subjects. And this is a very simple but very important concept to have. So from a collection of objects to a community of subjects. So my hope is that we can reclaim our ancestral, animistic, pre-patriarchal history by changing our perspectives from thinking that what came before us was primitive, backwards, inferior, less evolved, because also this is the bias that we have applied when we look at indigenous cultures. So in a way, we had to colonize ourselves in order to colonize everybody else. So instead of seeing this animistic history as primitive, backwards, and inferior or less evolved, we can shift to seeing it as something that can regenerate our relationship to nature, inform our decisions, and find our own 21st century science-informed way to bring Demeter and her laws back into our conversations as a subject, and maybe as the main subject. Thank you.
Food for thought, really wonderful. Pre-patriarchal. That is something definitely that I think is post-patriarchal, is on its way. Yes. Let's hope. All right. Well, let us open up the discussion and the conversation to those who might have questions for the panel from before. Also, I would invite Mark in particular, but other panelists who might want to just speak a bit more about their process and their evolution to this moment. So we have one question here, and if you want to direct it to someone in particular, then ask. If not, then I will ask one or two of the panelists to reflect. And also, you know what might be a good thing? I know people feel super comfortable, but maybe if we could have the mic in one place and people can come to the mic instead of you having to chase and figure out who's who. So if you wanna speak, maybe come down to behind the camera here, and then we can make a little line, and then folks can.
So where do you want me?
Do that. Over there. That's great. Perfect. Okay.
Okay, thank you. So I would suppose that many people here in the room would love to see more research into. Sorry? All right. Many people in the room would probably like to see more research, especially in Greece, in psychedelics and all their beneficial effects. At least I, for myself, would say I would like to see that. So what I would like to ask the panel is, what is the limiting factor? What do you need most to start a research in psychedelics now? And maybe I would like to direct it first to Mark and Tony to tell us what worked in the US, how they got the process going, and then obviously to Christina and Nikos to tell us what is needed in Greece.
Thanks, Uwe. Well, we're kind of at ground zero still. It feels like we've come a long way, and there's a growing cultural acceptance, at least in the United States, but I think it's broader than that through Europe, of the potential for the use of these agents in psychiatric, neurological, personal, not necessarily disorders, but in the improvement of human life. And for someone who's been interested in these compounds and these phenomena for half a century, that's a refreshing new statement. That's a statement of a major move forward that I think can have salutary effects on all of us, or many people. But I still think we're at ground zero. Basically, the door is now open. We are able to ask questions that we were not able to ask through most of my career. And exciting to me that we can now address those possibilities. That excitement is mixed with some trepidation, because I lived through the 60s where there was excitement with the new wave of psychedelic experience, and I saw it crash. And I don't, so I do have the excitement, but I also have the trepidation that we need to go carefully. I've never been a big believer in prohibition as a way to control society and people's behavior. But I'm also concerned that these compounds are not, it would not be wise for us to have them laissez-faire across from the school ground. So there's decriminalization efforts going on, there are legalization efforts going on. And so that's a pause I want to throw in as recognizing I'm a major advocate of the wise use of this technology. But we need to do it carefully. If I had the authority, I wouldn't know what the right solution would be to strike that balance between the freedom of individual freedoms and the protection that societies probably rightly impose upon their populace to protect them from too many guns or speeding too often, or I don't know where that balance is. But it is exciting to think that we now can ask questions about which of the many chemicals are available, or plants that are available, are going to be helpful for what populations of people therapeutically. What program of administration or utilization is optimal for different situations and different people with different compounds. There are companies working on 20-minute treatments. There are companies working on long-term treatments. We have no way of knowing. Right now, psilocybin has been the drug of choice for no good scientific reason, just practical reasons. It had been around a long time, it was safe, and it wasn't very long-acting. There are lots and lots of chemicals. Sasha Shulgin has 2 books on hundreds of possible candidate chemicals. Some are going to be not good, some are going to be better for some things. So we're at ground zero because there's a lot to be learned, and I think I believe there's a lot of potential for good with the wise application of this technology.
So briefly, real quick on the study, a lot of research going on. In my lane, I'm very excited about the advancement of the end-of-life research. Next step, legalization. People know MDMA was declined a few weeks ago. Psilocybin will get up to bat in 2 or 3 years. It's going to be a very big step. And then the largest question is, you were mentioning here, it sounds a bit strange, but how do you unleash this experience into a culture? I don't know. I have no idea. I have some vague ideas, but I don't always say them.
Can you hold the microphone up?
How do you unleash this experience into a culture like America or like any country with its own particular framework? It's complicated. I also don't like to control people, but I wonder, how do we do this? We're not so spiritually illiterate in our country, and there's a lot of immaturity, and I worry if we unleash this in a way. And finally, the states will probably legalize this or decriminalize it before the federal government does in America. And you're going to have a very complicated framework where it's legal in states but not federally legal, and that's going to set up a problem and a dilemma. But the cat's out of the bag, and we all got to hope for the best and try our best, but I have no easy answers.
Yes.
Okay. Can you hear me? Yes. I have a question for Mr. Bossis.
I'm sorry, hold on one second.
So am I going to answer this or? Sure. Thanks for the question. Such an important question. So you would go, nowadays, you can go to the European Union and ask for funding. January 2024, first time the European Union gave 6.7 million euros for a study to be conducted across Europe for intractable diseases like ALS, we heard before, like terminal cancer. So this is the first indication that a public organization is actually giving money for this type of research with psilocybin. As far as Greece is concerned, it would be possible to conduct studies provided you have a basic founder-provider who will actually invest his money to bring the product to a university clinic like mine, for example. So we are in an awkward position where we have the infrastructure. We've been doing research in ketamine. We've been doing research in cannabis products, for example, in the university clinic. We could potentially expand to psychedelics, but you would need that investor, first of all. You would need that investor to have a product that's been classified under the European laws as one that is not harmful to humans. That would be the first step. So please, if anybody can think of an investor, now is the time to let us know. We would be very happy to meet him.
Please.
Okay, it's a question for Mr. Bossis. I'm not sure I understood correctly. When you talk, you can hear me? When you talked about the palliative, the administration of some drugs, that they diminish the levels of anxiety and demoralization, and the most astonishing is that the continuation of the effect, that after 6 months or 4 years, they still, the graph is downwards. So the long-term effect is something very important as soon as the patient is still alive. So my question is under the condition that this drug administration has a continuity, I mean, it's not a week and then off, and is in that case the amount, how can I say it, of drugs that should be administered in order to keep this satisfaction level low is increasing? I mean, the dose should be reinforced, or it's something that, because, it's a domain that is, we are unfamiliar.
In this study, that's a long time. So 4.5 years is a long time to have a sustained effect on an experience. It's not the drug. There's no biological, residual mechanism that's lasting 4.5 years or even a year. There's a well-known study where we re-administered the medicine to people in 1962, 25 years later, and they continue to report it as the single most experience of their lifetime. This is different than regular pharmacology, where the mechanism stop taking the drug, and then the effects are done. This is a powerful experience, like when you first fell in love, or something happens, someone dies, and then the meaning of it could last a lifetime. So, we don't know. I mean, if a drug wears off in a few years, we do a re-administration, but these experiences do last a long time. 4.5 years is a long time. And that didn't drop at all. It was the same 4.5 years later.
And is this, do you administer, is it one session? One session?
Yeah, so as I said
hours,
before, yeah, so it's
and that one session of 6 hours lasts for 4 years, you're saying?
Well,
I mean, not the drugs, but the experience.
The memories of it,
the therapeutic effects.
The memories of that transformative experience, if powerful enough in that context, could last a lifetime.
I mean, I know when I tried psilocybin for the first time in college, I still remember what an amazing experience it was. And, I can remember conversations, I can remember visuals. And I don't know if that has or has not had a positive effect on my becoming, an adult, but I remember very clearly some of that, and it was a wonderful, very transformative experience. So I can see that, and that was over 4 years ago.
And the great Alan Watts once said on this question, when you get the message, hang up the phone. You know, and Ram Dass had a similar message, you know.
And essentially the word experience was mentioned many times. To answer your question, that is the framework you should be asking the question upon. It's not the drug. The drug is just a catalyst for an experience. You could have the same experience with possibly years of meditation. You could have a similar experience if it was a near-death experience that it would have changed your life. The drug is just the cause of it. It's the experience that is the healing.
Let me underscore that. Thank you. It's the
long-term effect. Because you remember, you know, how powerful something in your life, but the long-term effect in something as demoralization, I mean, I think it's very important.
Can I also make the point that at least when it comes to the medical studies, because you refer to the long-term effect, none of the substances has been actually in a medical establishment study that lasted more than 6 months. I mean, it's very uncommon that these studies would last more than 6 months after the first initial experience. So we actually don't know when it comes to long-term effects in mood, in anxiety, in depression. There is very few things that we actually know further than 6 months. I mean, obviously, we have some studies in your populations that last longer.
Well, thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
There is a difference. You know, that's important. I'm discussing an audience end of life, a normative existential human experience. Major depression, psychiatric disorders, that's different. That isn't for years or a lifetime. I'm interested in the non-clinical studies in a big way, right? That's different. That's different. That won't be 4 years. Someone major depressed. I mean, those results are actually quite iffy still. And it's a paradigm shift. Most medication people take, whatever people taking today, works as long as the drug's in your system. That you take it once, it's the memory. People with near-death experience, for the rest of their lives, say that changed my life.
Thank you for your question. Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to try and see how I can phrase this question. It seems to me that in the scientific studies that you're conducting, there's a very strong sensitivity to being a placebo or having people having some sort of pre-idea of what the experience is going to be, and you don't want that to contaminate the data and the ultimate experiment. But it feels to me that, at least in sort of the religious context, whether it be the Eleusinian mysteries in the past or more, modern shamanic traditions, the whole purpose is the bias, in the sense that there's an experience that comes out of the archetypal drug itself, and then the elders or the shamans take that archetypal experience and then embellish it with a narrative, which then becomes the ritual, almost as a brainwashing, if you wish, or indoctrination kind of experience. And in fact, that is, in some sense, the purpose of the experience. It is to mythologize the world, to re-enchant the world through an experience. And I guess my question is when science tries to compartmentalize those things, or, strictly take that component out of the whole experience, you're kind of creating the blind spot that you're trying to investigate in the first place. So I just wanted to see if you had any comments on that.
I agree.
I think a lot of people, all of us, have been very impressed with the duration of the effects clinically that we've seen in some of these clinical studies, 14 months out after 1 or 2 administrations, for example. And at one level, I think we shouldn't be so surprised that a profound experience has an enduring effect. Think about PTSD. We have many thousands of examples of a singular event happening at 2 o'clock on the Sunday afternoon, for example, having an enduring, long-lasting, presumably brain-mediated change in that person's life. So that a profound positive effect has a long enduring consequence shouldn't come as a big shock. Now, we've been working for a few decades to try to understand the brain changes that are associated or correlated or related to the consequences of a PTSD, a traumatic event engendering PTSD. We're not very far along in finding those. We've come up with some brain circuit changes, but it's just not an easy question to answer. But science will do its best. I don't know if it's compartmentalizing or not, but my point is we shouldn't be so surprised that a profound event has a long-term consequence.
I have a quite easy question that I'm sure you can all answer, the ones that have been doing the research, because we've heard that the key component to all this incredible change is the mystical experience, not the taking of the substance. So I was wondering, given the care for set and setting and preparation and intention and music and darkness and all these components, how many people don't have a mystical experience? And are there any other components, maybe in terms of personality or how people approach the experience, that can either encourage or discourage a mystical experience?
So real quick, prior question, also the indication matters. So spirituality study, what you're saying is true. Someone with major depression, you don't need that landscape, and it's all inside anyway, so, but you got me. Great question, and that gets compromised in a brief lecture. About 2/3 of the people, and most of the research at Hopkins NYU, we measure this, had a mystical experience. But please don't get hung up on that, because that's, there was more to come. It's along a gradient, so that's complete and partial, but it's still a mystical spirituality involved. And there are other experiences that are very powerful. There are experiences of an autobiographical nature, revisiting unresolved conflicts in one's life, readdressing trauma. I've had many patients who didn't have that experience, but I had one patient who went in his 70s, but his whole family was wiped out in the Holocaust, and he didn't have a transcendent mystical experience, but he revisited the traumas of his cousins being sent off to the camps, and a lot of incredible stuff came up that cleared the way for him to move forward in an easier way. So a lot can happen. There isn't a psychedelic experience. The second thing, we're too much in the infancy to answer that, I think, for me at least, Mark, with any validity, all the other factors, personality factors, why do people have all the experiences? Maybe in 50 years with a big data set, who's having what? But that's a bit of the unknown box, and these are kind of non-specific amplifiers, as Stan Graf once said. So they're amplifying, in a sense, who we are as well. So yeah, but it's big takeaway. This field just began again. We're at the top of the first inning, and we have a long ways to go in terms of those questions.
Hello, I'm here. First of all, I would like to thank everyone here for making this possible. Without you, this will not be happening. I think for everyone, it's a dream being concretized at this moment. I'm going to ask you a question regarding cancer patients. It was to be for the previous panel, but we didn't have time. I lost my father about a year ago through brain cancer, stage 4 glioblastoma. And seeing him being slowly down spiraling, it was really painful, not for him and for my family and me as well. And I'd like to ask you a question. How can we create a democratic, transcendental context so everyone can eliminate the fear of death and can have an access to this hidden dimension without big pharma's greed being like an obstacle for this?
Well, I mean, I think one of the answers was sort of slightly talked about, which is that we have to take it upon ourselves to find ways in which to maybe ritualize or ceremonially in our families, in our friends, in our community, to begin to have these conversations and to create spaces. I know back home where I live, I have a dear, dear friend who is from the Mexican culture, and she has an event sometimes 3 times a year. It's called The Dearly Departed, and she creates a ceremony for people to come with photographs and stories of their loved ones who have passed on, and they sit in ceremony and they invoke the spirit of the person who's passed on. I think the more we invite our own culture and create our own culture, and start to include our friends and our neighbors and our families, then we can move it on. We don't need to wait for anything. We don't need to wait for any drugs. We don't need to wait for any pharmaceuticals. We don't need to wait because we have ourselves and our community. But we have to also be doers and take action and not wait for someone else to do something that we want to see create. We should begin to create it ourselves, which is what democracy is about. Does anyone else want to say anything to that?
Well, I know the National Institutes of Health in the United States are at least talking a good game about the need, the imperative that these medicines be equally available to people of all socioeconomic places. Some may think that that's simply a way to put the whole thing down because there is some attitude of how can we stop this among the governmental organizations, shall we put it. But I think a lot of it is genuine, and your concern about pharma needing, or they say they need, a lot of money to be paid to cover the expense of developing it. That's a big, big problem, not just for these compounds, but for all pharmacology and prescription medicines. We need to reduce the cost of drug development, ultimately, because otherwise the economics just don't work.
And I have no easy answer. I mean, when you find out, call me because... But I don't know if the public really knows how a drug gets to market, at least in the States, the amount of money you need. And that's a, you're referring to, I mean, that's a real problem, but that's a big meta question. How do you drop this into a culture? One lane is medicalization. That's the lane we work in. The other frameworks, and how that question, above my pay grade, right? But
same sentiment.
Good question.
Tall order. But I'll piggyback on Tony. My naive, possibly romantic view is that through medicalization, once it becomes more available and once a critical mass of our society and our elders in particular have been exposed to those experiences, that could create the potential trickle down of breaking the taboo and slowly reintroducing these mysteries back to the community rather than, isolating them in a hospital or a private retreat or something like that.
Sorry for your loss. And also I think there is a way for us to establish a relationship to our deceased, to our dead, to our families, and have conversation and keep them alive. The tangible physical body is no longer, but you can still have a deep relationship to those who have crossed over.
Okay. Again, also from my side, it's so great to see all you from different fields working together to make the life of people better. On the other hand, you could also say you're trying very hard to destroy some of the most lucrative businesses in this world. We're talking about antidepressants, we're talking about therapy, we're talking about tobacco dependency. So I think there are people very concerned about what's happening here. And we know all what big tobacco is capable of doing if you go against their interests. So is that an issue? How do you address it?
I don't think any one of us is advocating against therapy, though. The others, yeah. Therapy, I think, should continue. Therapy. Like psychotherapy. Yeah. I think that should continue, and if anything, with the administration of psychedelics, therapy is even more imperative.
But it's much shorter.
It's what, sorry?
It's much shorter. If you can, the effects you show with only one doses and the progress that people have with PTSD is so impressive that maybe you don't need 3 years of therapy to get somebody back into his life. So also you're putting in danger some of those jobs.
Actually, it has been shown that it's better to combine psychotherapy with medicines when they are needed, not every time. And I don't know what's wrong about antidepressants. I mean, they have helped millions of people, and especially when they are combined with psychotherapy, it has been shown that they're very beneficial and they don't have a very high risk in comparison to other medicines. So I think the best is to take the treatment that we really need for each one of us. If it could be a personalized treatment that it really fits one patient, but many people really do these drugs to be better.
And also to reduce the dependency. It's a dependency reduction for some of the other drugs, yeah?
What Christina has brought up actually it brings up another problem that we have, and that is exemplified by the recent rulings of the FDA on
Mike, this way, turn it this way. Yeah.
On MDMA. As you know, as was mentioned, MAPS, Lykos, was the first to get one of these, it's not a psychedelic, it's an entactogen, in the FDA requesting approval as a clinical medicine for PTSD. The FDA, a major part of their rejection right now is that they don't know how much of it's the associated psychotherapy versus the pharmacological treatment. And by charter, the FDA is not, cannot assess psychotherapy. It's a catch-22. So to the extent, and I agree, that the combination of therapy and pharmacology is likely synergistic, especially in a case like MDMA and PTSD, we have a problem. The approval structure can't handle that.
We need a new regulatory framework, essentially, to facilitate psychedelic studies. Even the gold standard that we talked about with double-blind, like, what do you mean placebo in a psychedelic trial? That's a joke.
Yeah, I think we raised this issue. But I think what all of us would agree is that until now, therapy is a component of the whole process. I mean, in the clinical setting, right? The problem is that it's not regulated, as you well said. So that was why Lykos was one of the reasons it was rejected, wasn't it? So what is therapy with a psychedelic? What are the rules of this condition? Is it because you want to avert some form of danger to the patient? Is it because you want to enhance certain psychological aspects of the whole psychedelic process? So these are not really regulated. Therefore, it makes big pharma quite sort of, what's the right word? Oh, maybe, yeah. It's an unanswered question. But we have to give an answer to this unanswered question because we won't be able to bring these products forward to be approved by the FDA or the EMA. So it's one of the issues that needs to be clarified, at least in the very clinical settings that we conduct. Right.
Thank you.
My feeling too is that the drug, regarding this, what Nikos just said, MDMA is, I think, more of a classic assisted therapy. The person is in consensus consciousness, interacting with the therapists, working through a traumatic memory that they've been discussing before. I'm not keen on psychedelic-assisted therapy with psilocybin, at least for end of life. Of course, we're not assisting an ongoing therapeutic process. The person came in, we're preparing them for the event, how to go into it. They have the event, and then we're discussing the event. I'm really not doing a prior therapy, so I'm not assisting the therapy. So in our new study, we just call it psychedelic therapy. Other medications, other indications, it would be assisting a prior therapeutic process. So there's a lot that's got to get worked out, and the FDA issue is very complex because of that. And now the rumors are that they're going to strip the therapeutic part from the next application. And MDMA doesn't make sense. Just give MDMA and go from there. Psilocybin, it makes a little more sense. Safe holding environment, supportive person, and a lot of the insight is happening internally. But again, these last 10 questions, you're getting the same stuff from us. We don't know. It's a real new, brave new world. And it'll take a lot of smart people, a lot of wisdom, and a lot of changing of the paradigm.
Please.
Thank you. We have a lot of excellent questions to ponder here today. And I don't actually have a question, but I have a comment to make that I hope will bridge two of the themes that have emerged here today. One is the question that this lady that was sitting here before had, which has to do with long-term effects and the long-term lasting effect size of psilocybin administration that we see in these studies. And the second has to do with your question about the pharmaceutical model and the synergistic relationship between psychedelic-assisted therapy and the compound. And the way I think about these two things, there is an excellent study that has been conducted by Professor Gül Dölen from Johns Hopkins University. She is a neuroscientist, and she's administrating MDMA to encephalopods. But also, she did this study published last year that has to do with neuroplasticity and the long-term lasting effects of psychedelics. And so, I don't know where this, you. So this is an important study because it bridges integration after the fact, and it emphasizes a very important fact that has to do with the window of opportunity that is open after the administration, up to 6 weeks. So I don't want to tire you too much, but I think this is important to mention here. Neuroplasticity, I'm not a neuroscientist, but neuroplasticity decreases with age. And so there is a protein that is a metabolic intermediary to neuroplasticity. It's called BDNF, brain neurotropic derived factor. And in this study, the result was that there is increased activity of this protein, which increases the neuroplasticity window, which means that in this window of opportunity, after the administration of psychedelics, of psilocybin and MDMA, you have an opportunity to go in there and work with the therapist post-integration to integrate and reassess important correctional experiences that you might need to have in the therapy container. So, someone who has experienced tremendous amount of trauma and this is compartmentalized, this window of opportunity is an excellent opportunity to reintegrate some of this. Exactly, and this is why psychedelics should be combined with psychotherapy, and it has nothing to do with the pharmaceutical model and the profit-driven model, because you can never have enough therapy. Yes, maybe if you have a transcendental experience with psilocybin, maybe you will need maybe 6 months less of psychotherapy, but the important thing has to do with the integration and that window of opportunity. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, the work continues, generally speaking. So,
Alexandra.
Well, I would like to bring us back to Elefsina and to the question, why here? I think we heard a lot about it already, and I want to thank particularly Chiara for reminding us about the connection with the earth and the ancient myth, and whether people were taking psychedelics or not, whether they were using them or not in Elefsina. In the end, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that this place is connected to those spiritual experiences. And there I would like to thank Nikos Katsaoulis for his question about does it really matter? What matters is the ritual, what matters is the intention, what matters is the why we are here, why we are doing it, why we are coming here. And here I would like to ask you all, do you think that Elefsina, having provided us with a model, what I would call a perfect set and setting for hundreds and even thousands of years, where it was happening, something was happening, but it was controlled. There was a framework. People were coming and leaving, and everything was working well for the overall society. So do you think the right place to discuss this today is here because of this set and setting? And maybe we should learn something, particularly when we risk again to have this backlash and that we risk again to lose all the benefits we heard about, and we know that this must not happen. So that's my question to anyone who cares to answer at the panel.
Yes.
Well, I think it's notable that there are really striking similarities in the reports that we've heard about the rituals and their impact on people. The ineffable is the most common adjective used to describe the psychedelic experience, if you do a word search. And the statements that one event changes one and you only need to do it once is part of the mystery. So I agree, we don't need to, and we can never probably know whether a psychoactive agent contributed to the experiences here in Eleusis. But the set and setting and many of the reported effects are very parallel. So it would be hard for us to reproduce the kikion and the ritual experience that was so effective here. But we have at least a tool that mimics. Maybe it's not the same because maybe there was no psychoactive agent involved. But right now it's the closest I can think of to reproducing the effects that were reported from the mysteries. Therefore, I would argue that your point is well taken, that set and setting as described here could be a profound lesson for us to follow and explore the synergy of set, setting, and an inducing agent.
As to whether it was the perfect, I guess we'll never know because all of it is lost, but it did last for a while, so they must have been doing something right.
I'm still on the barley, obviously if they made a potion, a drink, it's like when I think of when you drink ayahuasca or whatever, and I think, I think about things like that. Like, I'm gonna make myself a little tea, and someone made it. Like, wow, what's happening? Okay, and I'm gonna now invite a bunch of people to try it, and then it just grows and grows and grows. And I think a lot of the time when we investigate things like that, we also wonder: is it just happening to me, or is this also? Did you feel that? Did you feel that? So I think there was definitely something in that wine.
Yeah?
Oh, thank you.
Can I just say a very short comment? Elefsina, in this kind of language of the more kind of scientific, would be an expectational bias. So just coming here, the whole ritual just enforces that sense of well-being, of later things, of spirituality. So in the language of those clinical trials I was trying to demonstrate, it would be a typical example of that expectancy bias that seems to create problems in our sort of recent and contemporary studies. Apart from that, the ritual is so important. How can we live without the rituals? In our spiritual life, in our everyday life, we need that ritualistic attitude as much as we need any type of medication, if you ask me. So once again, thank you for inviting us in this beautiful place, in this beautiful environment with so strong connotations to it.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, definitely depression and stress and fear is a pandemic in the world today, and I think any medication or any method of spirituality is very needed, and maybe both together could do better work. But I'm wondering if this type of cure of negative feelings includes violence, it includes revenge and hate. Can those be corrected with this kind of medication?
So the question is, can psilocybin, MDMA, LSD, can this kind of medicine therapeutic process help with violent people, with people who, yes? People who perpetuate violence, people who have like hate groups. Has anyone gone into the white nationalists in the United States?
Understood the opposite. I think she asked whether it can cause violence.
Oh, does it cause it or does it help it?
No, if it can be cured. In other words,
yes, it can be cured by it.
If there have been experiments with people who are violent, whether individually or as a group or nations,
was a prison experiment.
Have been treated to see if that has an effect on them.
There was one prison experience many years ago, experiment. I'm not sure. Is there any current stuff, Mark? It's one of the areas they're looking into. But I would also cite there's no cure. It isn't magic. Charlie Manson took psychedelics. Look what he did. We know there are not good groups around, right? Certain violent groups who take it, it amplifies their own message. So I think we need to be careful how we see these as some kind of panacea for everything. However, with sociopathy and antisocial behavior and violent behavior, I think, is there any current stuff going on?
Well, I know George Greer, who was one of the co-founders of Hefter, and had a career as the prison psychiatrist for the state of New Mexico, always felt very strongly that convict rehabilitation, as he put it, could be facilitated. He had a lot of experience as a clinician with MDMA as a psychotherapeutic adjunct for the relationship between patient and client, and psychiatrist. But he was also saying that about classical psychedelics. So that's not evidence, but someone whose knowledge is a lot closer than anybody here, I think. Yeah, there was a Leary.
We can't hear you, but okay, so I want to thank Mark and Christina, Nikos, Anthony, Chiara, and Yanis so much for giving us this incredible conversation. Thank you to the World Human Forum. Thank you to Eleusis.